I am a member of a group that has been very much disrespected and belittled, and I am criticized and abused for belonging to it. And because I belong to it, I engage in practices that people find very despicable. I am a politician. I am a regular practitioner of partisanship. But I'm not doing that here except to note that the driving force behind the effort to keep Terry Schiavo being fed, despite her complete mindlessness in every other way, was led by the then governor of Florida, Jeb Bush, who not only tried very hard even after every judge in the 30 federal and state judges ruled in that case from 29 to 1 saying, are you crazy? No, Congress, you do not decide cases like this. Mind your own business. Respect the separation of powers. A couple of weeks after that, Jeb Bush got in touch with the prosecuting attorney in the county in which the Schivos had lived and where she had fallen and been found inert by her husband, and asked him to open a criminal investigation. By that time, many years had passed, so a lot of people here wanted to know the answer. Only one crime could still have been prosecuted given the passage of time, and it was murder. Jeb Bush was so enraged about this and so unwilling to let go from enforcing his particular religious view in this situation that he asked the prosecuting attorney to investigate her husband for murder when there had never been the slightest suggestion that this fall had anything to do with this collapse with him. So remember that 2 years from now.
That's amazing. I remember that.
Hi, I'm over here. I just wanted to thank you very much for the example that you give to activists, because it really is important that we have good examples of how to behave and how to act in the world to achieve the goals we want to achieve. And to that, I want to ask, you spoke about rancor, and you said that you like rancor, which I think many activists have, rightfully so, and you want to learn how to direct that properly. So you speak about rancor, but you also project critical thinking and diplomacy. How do you, while you like rancor, you still manage it? How do you do that?
No, I said I was good at rancor. You divide the world into your allies, and you want to spend a lot of time coordinating with them. But there's nothing to be gained by you all going out and having a big rally, nobody cares. You then want to focus your persuasive efforts on people who are either undecided or against you but persuadable. And then you recognize that there are a segment of people who send those kind of emails. I think rancor, return rancor to rancor, and I said I'm good at rancor. You don't treat everybody the same. But here's the thing that you have to make clear. If people are abusive to you in the name of religion, it is perfectly acceptable and sometimes emotionally necessary to return the abuse. But abuse their abusiveness, not their religion. Don't do them the service of saying, oh, you stupid religious person. You say you jerk. That's the tendency. Is to fight back against them angrily, but not in their own kind of group terms. So the answer is yeah, fight back, defend yourself. And in fact, what you try to do is to frame your arguments. In fact, it can work in your favor. You can say to people, you know what? Look at some of these people who claim to be the most religious. Look how abusive they are. Look how. So, what does that say to the argument that religion makes you a nice person? In fact, there may be a correlation in some cases between a degree of religiosity and some of this abusiveness. But I'm saying that it's absolutely, that's logical. And I think that's the way to do it, is to fight them back, but expose them for that, and you use that as an example of people who persuade them.
Just to let you know, we got a pretty good number of questions.
Can I answer quickly?
So go ahead. Yeah, we're all aware of President Bush's religious leanings and proclamations and so on. With your time in Washington, do you have any insight into the religious leanings or practices of Cheney and Rumsfeld and some of the neocons?
No, I don't. They actually, well, I take it back. There is in the implicit and sometimes explicit in the neocon view, you would have to ask, why do they want America to get so involved in so many different places? Why is it America's role to be the enforcer of order everywhere in the world? Not democracy, by the way, of order. And some of them take God-given. So there is an element of the theological in the neocons, and I think it is legitimate to look at that and point it out. To what extent they are sincere, I don't know, but they are prepared to use this, and the notion that, you know, this is America's divine mission, God-given mission to rule the world. And that's another point in which they are out of sympathy with the majority of American people, and we should go on that. Next.
Hello, my name is Carla, and I'm a lesbian woman, and I'm also transgender. A question for you: is it humanist to leave trans out of LGBT rights?
No, that's why, for instance, when we took up the hate crimes bill,
Because you kept them out of ENDA, so oh no.
when you finished, you could.
Please let me finish. I'm not a politician and I'm not very experienced in arguing against politicians, but please let me finish.
I apologize.
Okay, in your country, I have no civil rights, so how can it be said that I have a country? I have a 1 in 8 chance of being killed. If I defend myself against assault, I'll probably be the one who goes to jail. I have a 1 in 2 chance of being raped, and the courts most likely will tell me that I dressed too provocatively, and my child was taken away from me by your courts for the crime of being trans in the USA. Now, how can it be said to be humanist to leave trans out of the rights that other people enjoy?
It's not, where were you when your job was taken away?
The state of Vermont, by a judge.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
Judge by virtue of having gone to Bible school.
Why do you think that I'm in charge of the judges of Vermont? You said my judges in my country. I will tell you, I have had nothing to do in my life with who got to be a judge in Vermont. It is none of my doing.
Okay.
Secondly, I'm sorry, you go ahead until you finish.
Trans was left out of ENDA, and I'd like to know why.
All right, you said that, that's why you said that. Let me start in the first place with regard to violence. From the very beginning of the consideration of a hate crimes bill in the Congress, we were explicitly trans-inclusive. I believe I'm the first person who talked on the floor of the House about the need to protect people with transgender, and noted that they were especially victims of violence. And at all times when we have considered the hate crimes bill, we have had transgender inclusion, and it's now part of the law, transgender inclusion. When we introduced the first ENDA bills, actually they were introduced before I got there, but people weren't thinking about trans. I will bet, you know, great people, Bell Hobbs and others. By the early part of 2000, when we got serious about passing it, we did include it in the legislation. The problem is that from 1995 until 2007, when the Republicans controlled the House, they were big enough, the majority had total control. So in 2007, we brought out a trans bill that we brought out an Employment Non-Discrimination Act that included trans people. And as we lobbied for the bill, we found that we did not have the votes at that point to pass the inclusive bill. I thought at that time we should do what a lot of other states had done and pass the bill with as much as we could get, and then build on that and come back and do the rest. That's what happened in New York. In 2000, New York passed a bill to ban discrimination in employment for gay, lesbian, and bisexual people. They didn't have the votes for the transgender piece. That bill passed a few years later. With the experience in the first bill having been there, they were able to go back and add transgender. Similarly, Massachusetts passed a bill in 1989, and only a couple years ago was able to add transgender. But here's where we were at the federal level. Now, I'll explain how it works. In 1972, I filed the first gay rights bill in Massachusetts. And I encountered, I was still college, but I decided I had to file the bill as a moral obligation. I encountered people who, that makes me feel icky. 30 years of people being out altered that. Reality being present. The trans community did not become as public and as out with the support of others until more recently. By 2007, we had not yet sufficiently dispelled that prejudice. So while we introduced the bill, and that's the way we wanted to pass it, we had a choice. No bill at all, or a bill that excludes trans people at first, and then we build on it. The history of every civil rights bill has been to get part of it and not all of it, whether it was for race or for anything else. In fact, the bill passed the House, it died in the Senate. At the time, when people said, how come you can't include transgender people, my answer was very unfortunately true. At that point, there was protection for LGBT people in Massachusetts, in Maryland, in New York, but none of them included trans people. And frankly, in America today, if you can't get something done in Massachusetts, Maryland, and New York, it doesn't become easier when you throw in Florida, Nebraska, and Texas. We also felt, however, that the motto, doing the best you can and going back, worked, and it had worked. By now, the trans community with a lot of allies has achieved the status, largely, that lesbian and gay people were able to achieve starting in the post-normal. I am convinced the next time you have a Democratic House, Senate, President, I wish that weren't necessary, I wish it weren't partisan, I wish I could eat more and not gain weight. No point in me talking about it. The next time there's a Democratic House, Senate, President, ENDA will pass and it will be fully trans inclusive. And that's the answer. I excluded trans and you're worried subject around, that ignores the fact that I have been a consistent advocate of a hate crimes bill, and in 2009, when we had for the first time, and the only time, unfortunately, recent years, a Democratic House, Senate, President, we passed a trans-inclusive hate crimes bill dealing with violence. And we then had a choice. Were we going to do an ENDA or a LGBT in the military? We did the military. That was seen as more doable. But ENDA is down on the list. So I reject the idea that I have excluded trans. I tried very hard to include it. I'm the first person to mention it favorably on the floor of the House. We included trans people in the hate crimes bill. We tried to do a fully inclusive Employment Non-Discrimination Act. We couldn't in 2007, but through a lot of hard work by a lot of people, trans people on the forefront, we've now reached the point where we can. I will also say, by the way, that I am very proud to have hired the first transgender. I'm sorry, come back to the microphone if you got to speak. I recognize the prejudice, and I realize that part of the problem was that people didn't know trans people. So in 2009, December 2008, I hired the first professional transgender employee in the history of the Congress. So it shouldn't have taken that long. His name is Diego Sanchez. He's now the political director for PIFA. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm from Massachusetts, so thank you so much for your work. I'm a big admirer. I just became a community organizer, so as such a great activist, what do you think is the best advice that you can give me or everybody here on how to really make change in a grassroots level?
You seek out a couple of things. You join a lot of community organizations, you get to know people, and approach them in a non-confrontational way. Seek out points of agreement and work from there. I say connect the dots. You find out where you agree with them, and very likely they may not see how that would lead to this or that political position, and encourage them to do that. If it's specifically over humanism and non-theism, part of it would be, the internet now is available. Set up a group, advertise it. Invite people to a meeting. The first people will be among those who are already with you. But and then, have a group of people who already agree, and they say, would everybody bring someone who is
This is 25.
at least open to talking with us, but not with us, to the next meeting, and build from there. And do it by showing them the consequences of it.
Thank you.
I'm from the great state of Florida that refuses to pass an ERA bill and refuses to pass a gun law. In fact, I'm allowed to carry a gun if I want to, but I don't. I guess my question is, because I'm a humanist, I believe in humans, and I don't like to see them shot and killed. Can you tell me what the Congress is doing to pass a decent gun law, and what we as humanists can do to help